Good afternoon, everyone from Hsrt. We are going to be in a class with Rich Perez dealing with the Many Voices project that he has developed at Hope. Most of you probably have attended a class with Rich in the past, so we probably know a lot about his background, but let me just give you a couple of items. Rich is not only an educator and director at Hope, he's also an actor. He's also been a artistic director at the Bloomington Playwrights Project in Indiana, also been an associate artistic director of the Chicago Dramatists. He has been the managing director of Hope Summer Rep. You may or may not know that in addition to directing lots and lots of shows, a couple of them, by the way, Rich, that come to mind as I'm thinking about you being a director of shows at Hope, as I'm thinking about Roust About and Cry It Out. Both of them were favorites with me. But Rich has also acted in TV shows. He's been with Kelsey Grammer and Boss. He's been on Chicago Fire. He's had parts in Chicago Med. And I think now he is happy being a educator and director at Hope College. So the Many Voices Project, let's welcome Rich. Thanks, Rich, for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for showing up today, friends. I always enjoy spending time with you. So the Many Voices Project, when Al initially asked me to come in and engage with a conversation with you today, one of the questions he said I should ponder is what made me want to start this program. And as I continued to think about it, obviously many things, but I kept going back to my childhood. And so if it's okay, I'm gonna share a little bit about what it was like for me to grow up, and ultimately I think it'll make sense as to why this was such an important project for me. Until the time I was 9, I grew up in Oakland, California, in a predominantly African-American neighborhood. And I can still remember how at home and safe I felt there. We lived below my grandparents in a renovated basement apartment where I often heard the Motown sound coming from next door. My friends Barbara and Lisa, two African-American young ladies, would practice their competitive dance routines, and I always thought they looked so cool in their matching outfits and sequin leotards. And they were just such great friends. And I remember watching them perform and just how impactful it was to see their talent, and also just listen to, they were my first. They first exposed me to people like Ray Charles and other great R&B artists. Also, I was very close to my grandparents. My grandfather would sit on the front porch every evening sipping his white port wine, and I'd be so proud to sit next to him. Everyone in the neighborhood knew who he was, and he would often, and they would often stop and chat, or at least wave and call out his name, Jesus. He would often tell me stories about growing up in Mexico and how he left home at a very early age, 14, as a matter of fact, because of the corruption in his small village. He came to the US and, of course, encountered his share of hardships and prejudice, but he was an avid advocate for people and always spoke out and challenged those prejudices whenever he could. But I was especially close to my grandmother. And if you don't mind, I'm going to share an excerpt from a one-person play I wrote a while ago, and I think gives you a peek into my early years. It starts, "My Nana was short and plump. She had beautiful red hair and sparkling brown eyes, and always smelled like Pond's cold cream and mint, and I adored her. She introduced me to the first magical place I ever experienced. It was a department store in downtown Oakland called Swan's. And every 2 weeks, my grandmother and I would board a city bus and travel across town. Swan's is in an ancient building that took up a whole city block. We'd enter the revolving doors from 10th Street and suddenly be transported to a different time. To the left was the locksmith stand with hundreds of uncut keys and keychains dangling from their wooden pegs like Christmas ornaments. The grinding metal and sparks sang through the store. To the right was the cobbler, his little square cubby stuffed with shiny revived boots and shoes wrapped in brown paper. Others, like little orphans long forgotten, sat on a display waiting to be adopted. Next to the cobbler is Walter, the shoe shine guy. His big white mustache glistens against his shiny black skin. His toothless smile is always present. The big round butchers with their white aprons speckled red fill their cold porcelain meat displays with wide-mouthed fish and whole pigs, I convince myself, are only sleeping. Like a foreign marketplace, food is everywhere. Stacked too high, rainbow-colored produce threatens to avalanche if I breathe too hard. Oranges, reds, yellows, and greens all glisten like pretty new toys. There are jars of giant pickles and floating eggs in barrels filled with a world's supply of peanuts. Nana and I slowly walk up and down each aisle. She picks something up, and so do I. She checks the price, and so do I. She puts it back on the shelf, and so do I. And then I spot the item that I have to have. It's never a toy. It's always something practical, grown up, like a keychain or a wallet, aftershave. I gaze at it longingly until I am sure Nana sees me, then reluctantly put it back on the shelf. She says, "¿Quieres eso? Do you want that?" "No, Nana, it's too expensive." "¿Qué tanto cuesta?" 99 cents, I say. She smiles, puts the item in the cart, and off we go. Our day at Swan's always culminates with a trip to the lunch counter. Stainless steel swivel stools with red plastic caps. She lets me order whatever I want from the hair-netted ladies behind the counter. When our food finally comes, she always says the same thing. "Ay, es mucho." It's too much. When we finish, she takes a bunch of napkins, wraps whatever's left over, and puts it in her purse. A purse so large it resembles luggage more than anything. I often think to myself, if we ever get stranded someplace, we don't have to worry. There are probably meals in there to last us for weeks. With our bellies full and our arms loaded with packages, we board the bus for home. And as the bus moves down the streets, I look straight ahead out the front window. Nana turns her head and gazes at me for the longest time. I pretend not to notice, because in those moments, I feel so loved. Thanks for indulging me in that. I always get a little choked up at the end of that because she was such a huge impact on me. So those first 9 years were instrumental in developing my appreciation for urban settings, good R&B music, and social justice. The summer I was 9, my father died in a swimming accident. My mother, younger brother, and I moved to the suburbs to be closer to her sister and brother. Of course, the loss of my father and the relocation to a very different setting changed me in a profound way. What had been an inquisitive, funny, outgoing kid became a withdrawn, introverted loner for several years. And then something fantastic happened in high school. I took an acting class. And I can honestly say that it saved my life. I was surrounded by like-minded kids who all had a passion for theater and a teacher who saw something in me and helped me discover a voice I had lost years before. Theater became a place where I learned to appreciate my own unique gifts as well as those of others. So when I was 20, I moved to New York City to study acting and lived and worked there for about 13 years. During that time, I was never so happy as when I was in the classroom. I remember the excitement of seeing a fellow student have a breakthrough. And I had the good fortune to study with many celebrated acting teachers and realized early on that I too wanted to inspire students in a way they had inspired me and others. I knew that eventually I would end up in academia, but wanted to spend as much time training and working as an artist before I made the move. Eventually, I would end up working in Chicago as an actor and director. And when I saw the posting for the position at Hope in 2013, well, I applied and they were crazy enough to hire me. So here I am today, and very blessed to be here. I won't beat around the bush and say that it's always been easy being a resident here. While there's much to appreciate about this town and Hope College, there are many hurdles we have to overcome when it comes to issues of diversity and racial equity. One of my biggest frustrations early on has been discussing a season each year and our perceived inability to produce certain titles due to the lack of students of color in the department. And yet I've always thought, well, I'm not sure I'd want to be part of a department where I rarely see people who look like me on the stage or see my story being told. Unfortunately, this is not merely a problem at Hope College. It mirrors a larger problem in American theater. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you today. I'll share a little more insight. A new report has found stark disparities in racial representation and pay gaps on the New York stage. The vast majority of writers and directors remain white, while some theater nonprofits spend up to 6 times as much on white actors as actors of color. The annual study analyzed the 18 largest nonprofit theaters as well as Broadway companies in New York City during the 2017-18 season. The season as a whole reflected previous years in its systemic inequities and overrepresentation of white actors, writers, and directors. Nearly 80% of Broadway and off-Broadway shows writers were white, and 85.5% of the directors. Over 60% of all roles in New York City stages went to white actors, a rate double the population, the white population of New York City, which is 30.1% of the residents. According to the study, 23.2% roles went to Black actors, 6.9% to Asian actors, 6.1% to Latino actors, 2% to Middle Eastern or Northern African actors, and 0.2% to indigenous actors. The report also found that nonprofit theaters for which contractual minimum salaries are based on revenue earned at different size venues spent $1.70 on white actors for every $1 spent on an actor of color. And the wage gaps differed greatly by company. The Roundabout Theater Company, ironically one of my favorite companies in town, spent $6.09 on white actors for every $1 on actors of color. The Atlantic Theater spent $1.46 for every $1. A similar wage gap was highly likely to exist on Broadway, the study said, but could not be determined as Broadway houses do not publish negotiated salaries. So the study arrives months after a roster of more than 300 leading stage artists have signed a letter decrying radical inequality in the world of white American theater. We quote, "We have watched you unchallenge your white privilege, inviting us to traffic in the very racism and patriarchy that festers in our bodies while we protest against it on our stages, on your stages." The letter reads from names including Lynn Nottage and Viola Davis and Dominique Morceau, who wrote the show that I'm currently directing, Detroit 67. Quote, "We have watched you promote anti-Blackness again and again." So these are folks who are probably some of the most popular playwrights in the country, as far as being African-American and people of color. At the same time, there are very few select folks, and they realize that there is certain privilege in that. So the study echoed the letter's demands for systemic change during an unprecedented pause for New York theater due to the coronavirus, with reopening slated for 2021. Quote, "Theater will come back, and when it does, it can't return to normal," the report said. "We have a unique moment to come together as an industry during this pause and to demand better. So this has had a huge impact on the field over the past 7 months. The document is the official manifesto of the We See You White American Theater campaign. It released a 31 pages of demands written on behalf of Black, Indigenous, and people of color, AKA BIPOC theater makers. The document addresses the necessary redistribution of power and funding, the prioritizing of anti-racist practices, and decentering of whiteness, and outlines several measures toward a more equitable, safe industry, including specific action steps for the Broadway League of Actors, Equity, which is the union for actors, IATSE, SDC, basically all the organizations that supposedly protect actors in this country and directors. So I'll get a little into the demands. The document is huge. As I said, it's approximately 31 pages, and it gets down to some very nitty-gritty, but I'll give you an overall view of what some of the demands are. The demands include that every department, sector, or independent company affiliated with any commercial theater or Broadway show be made up of at least 50% BIPOC staff and artists across all levels and positions. Increased and more equitable funding for BIPOC organizations, especially post-COVID, a recalibration of staff salaries at institutions, and ongoing anti-racism training for all theater staff and board members, including weekly check-ins on this work. We demand accountability to anti-racism, in quotes, reads the document, followed by the mandate that theaters' anti-racism policies be publicized within 6 months from now, meaning July of 2020. That study just came out and was very hopeful, so that's great. Beginning with cultural competency, the demands include the institutional leaders make honest efforts to establish long-term relationships with BIPOC artists, to an end to police practices of audience response, and to the policing of BIPOC audience members in theater lobbies and rehearsal studios, and that all creative teams undergo anti-racism workshops at the beginning of each rehearsal, culminating in signed statements. So that's a lot I'm throwing at you, but I think it's good context for the moment we stand at currently in terms of American theater, in terms of its influences on academic theater. There is a whole section on expectations for academic theater to be more responsible in how we interact with BIPOC students. I will say this about my faculty. I brought this document to them, and we immediately stepped up and read the entire thing over the course of several weeks out loud, talked about where we are as a faculty, and are we currently meeting the demands that are part of this. And so I couldn't be more proud of our faculty for doing that. I mean, it's ongoing work. Obviously, all these things aren't going to change overnight, but I appreciate the fact that we want to be on the forefront of making these changes and not followers, because we'll be left behind, and certainly we don't want to be in that position. So ironically, around the same time that this document was distributed, I was talking to my chair about my goals for the following year, this year. And she mentioned my commitment to BIPOC theaters, which she knows I have in my, my work with them, and suggested perhaps I might explore ways to create more opportunities for Hope students of color. So that semester, the summer before this, the Many Voices Project was born. I spent the summer developing the mission statement, which I'll read to you in a moment, and reading many plays to organize our first season of plays, of play readings by BIPOC writers. So this is the mission statement that I came up with, and it goes like this. The Many Voices Project, MVP, was inspired by a need to expand the repertoire of stories told on our American stages. While Hope College's theater department has always strived to be an inclusive body, we feel the time has come to be even more intentional in our efforts to support underrepresented voices. Those voices include, but are not limited to, African American, Latinx, American Indian, persons with disabilities, women, and the LGBTQ communities. If we are to become the just and equitable society that so many of us long for, then we must create space for every voice to be heard and honored. So I'll share with you the 4 plays chosen for the initial readings that for this year. The first one was presented on September 25th, and the play was called Fade by Tanya Saracho. She's a native Mexican, but has done a lot of work in the United States and now is doing very well in television in Los Angeles. I know her from an association that when I was running my theater company in Indiana, I produced a new play festival of Latinx writers. And so I met her in Chicago, and I brought her theater company to town, to Indiana, and have had a long relationship with many of those company members. So Fate is, I'll give you a brief description. When Lucha, a Mexican-born novelist, gets her first TV writing job, she feels a bit out of place on the white male-dominated set. Lucha quickly becomes friends with the only other Latino around, a janitor named Abel. As Abel shares his stories with Lucha, similar plots begin to find their way into the TV scripts that Lucha writes. So that first reading there's 2 people in the cast. So Sophia Munoz, who's a student, a theater student and an art student at Hope, and myself were the cast. And so this was the first time we tried this whole thing. We wanted to air it live over the internet. And so we were just figuring out all the possible fallout from trying something brand new like this. And we had to overcome a lot of issues in terms of the technical aspects, but it was so great that we finally got it off the ground. We were able to finally record it that night that we presented it. And so we were able to offer it to the audience, even though it wasn't live, which is what ultimately I want all the performances to be. So the next play, Detroit 67 by Dominique Morisseau, was presented October 16th of 2020. And I'll give you a brief description of that. And this obviously is a play I'm working on now to bring that opens next week. In 1967 Detroit, Motown music is getting the party started, and Shell and her brother Lank are making ends meet by turning their basement into an after-hours joint. But when a mysterious woman finds her way into their lives, the siblings clash over much more than the family business. So that cast was originally 5 students, Kanaya Houston, Ruben Jerome, Elena Sitzman, Alexander Johnson, and Tia Hockenhole, who you may have remembered if you saw Doubt. She was the African-American mother, so she was in this cast. So a great thing happened as a result of this reading. We realized that, oh, heck, we have people who are interested in taking this to the next step, right? And so because that was the first question I asked them. And fortunately, all of them said absolutely. And ultimately, they auditioned again because we felt that was fair for anybody else who wanted to also appear in the production. And they all came back and they all had a great audition. And so they are the same cast that was in that original reading. If you come to see it, you will see them playing their original roles. The next play, called Smart People by Lydia Diamond, will show March 12th. In the description, it is the eve of Obama's first election. 4 of Harvard University's brightest, a surgeon, an actress, a psychologist, and a neuropsychiatrist, are all interested in different aspects of the brain, particularly how it responds to race. But like all smart people, they are also searching for love, success, and identity in their own lives. And then finally, the last reading this year is called Exit Strategy by Ike Holter, and that'll appear April 9th. And that story is the teachers of a crumbling Chicago high school don't live in an inspirational teacher movie. They bring mousetraps from home, they make the toilet paper last, and they show up for the kids nobody else shows up for. So when the school is slated for closure, the weight of the inevitable bears down on the community. Students and teachers alike discover their breaking points. So those were the first productions that I chose for the readings. So we're heading into the second semester, obviously, and the last 2 plays of the season. Just a little bit of recap of how we came to decide about Detroit 67. We were trying to figure out at the end of last year, what were the plays? Things had to change because of, obviously, COVID rules. And the play that I was originally going to direct, called Men in Boats, was it was sort of a devised piece, meaning that you can kind of create you can kind of create it any way you want, but one thing that has to happen is there's these women playing men who are on boats traveling down the Colorado River. So obviously that was much to the proximity of the actors with each other was not going to be possible. So we had to quickly figure out what we were going to do next. And we had just shown Detroit 67. And like I said, the cast was very willing. And so I took it to the faculty and I said, look, I think, we often say we can't do plays because we don't have the students of color to do them. Well, this is a perfect opportunity. And of course, they were gracious and jumped on it. And so I just feel really grateful that, here we are putting that on. It's especially important, I think, to note that in the history of the Hope Theater Department, which is approximately 53 years, there has never been a play by a Black playwright in our season. Now, Hsrt has done some, and there have been student projects, 490 projects, but on our main stages, there is that has never been the case. So I'm especially happy about that. It's obviously it's been too long, but at the same time, I think it's a great moment in the history of our department. And it's not, and I will say this, it's not just Black playwrights, it's any playwright of color. So last season I directed the Thanksgiving play, which was written by an Indigenous playwright. And so it's been a good year, and we're really, really proud of that. So I'll talk a little bit about the challenges of working with the cast, and they're to be expected. I went into this project knowing that, one, I would have to, I would be working with some green actors who their experience runs the gamut from never having been in a play before to, as I said earlier, a student that has had a lot of experience, including a couple shows with me at Hope and before. And so how do you navigate that? You want to you know, I sometimes feel, if I'm being honest, there's a added responsibility to make sure that these students are shown in the best light. And I mean, we do that with every student, right? But this is a new experience for them, and how do we give them the best opportunity? And that has felt like a heavy responsibility for me, one that I welcome, but also at times am I giving them, I could question, am I giving them the absolute best experience that I can? And so always striving for that. Also making sure that they feel safe and welcome. I think in many ways it is it's a new realm of interaction with a department that, as I've said, they've never interacted with before. And so how do we make them feel welcome and make sure that they get whatever they need throughout the process? So, you know, all this is to say that I think we as a faculty and we as a school, the fact that we even have to second guess what shows we really want to produce in a season, that shouldn't be the case. And one of my personal goals is that we eventually get to the point where any play we want to produce, within reason, of course, it's appropriate for a college audience and for an educational institution, is that we don't have to second guess whether we have the actors or not. That eventually students of color and other underrepresented students know that the theater department is a place where they can come, they will see their stories on our stages, and they will be welcome. And we're working toward that. I think we still have ways to go, but we are taking the first steps, and I think the Many Voices Project is the beginning of that. So happy to open it up to some conversation now.
We should find out if Kim has anything in the chat.
Great.
I don't know if Kim is listening right now or not. My chat at least looks empty.
Okay.
No, Donna Vogel put some things in the chat. If Kim hasn't seen it yet, may I ask my questions?
Absolutely.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, since we've been isolating, I have been watching theater on Public Theater out of New York City. Have you seen any of those? Have you been have they been available to you?
Not those specifically, but I have been part of and have seen many. And it's, you know, that's many theaters are staying alive via the internet now. And so.
Right. Well, Public Theater, the first one I saw was offered free of charge. The rest have had a small fee or a donation expected. The first one was called The Line. And it was done as a Zoom meeting. It was a play, but it was done as a Zoom meeting. And it was about the frontline workers during this COVID pandemic. And they included not only a nurse and a doctor, but a nursing home director, a bus driver, and an ambulance driver. And they were all people of ethnic backgrounds, so diverse, and it just was a fabulous play. But since then, the pieces that they've been putting online from Public Theater have all been interracial plays. Some of them I have enjoyed very much and some not so much, but The Line stood out as something very important, especially because we're living through that.
Sure.
Also,
look into that.
The Chicago Shakespeare Theater produced Peter Pan for Christmas. Did you see that one?
No, I saw that advertised. It looked fantastic.
Okay, it was interracial. Wendy's mom was a Black woman. Wendy's dad was Hispanic. Peter Pan, unfortunately, was a fabulous actor, and he was white. But all the children, the Lost Boys, were from every color of the rainbow. It was fabulous. It was really, really good and well done. And that was performed on the stage, not in a video kind of format, although it was a video. And I don't know if that was done live this year or if it had been done in the past and they were just rerunning it.
Sure, yeah.
So there are opportunities for those of us stuck at home.
Yeah.
Another question I had was a few years ago, you did a few bilingual plays, which I thought were so great. They were in Spanish and English at the same time. Very, very good for those of us who have a foreign language in our ear, but maybe not that one. And I was wondering if you're considering doing those again.
Absolutely.
Something
Yeah,
along
yeah.
that line.
So, you know, one of the dreams and hopes is that as we expand our student base involved in the theater department, obviously some of those folks are going to come with more than one language, and that would be a dream come true too. So I constantly have my eye out for eyes and ears out for those kind of plays, definitely.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rich, I also have a question from Anne asking if there will be an effort to recruit theater students of color.
Yes, absolutely. That's one of our, well, we've always tried that. We go to different conferences to recruit and often give first priority because we have something called the Distinguished Artist Award, which is a small scholarship. And so we make a point of trying to hold several of those for specifically talented students of color. And, you know, again, it's a challenge, right? Because when the students come to visit campus, they often don't see themselves represented very much. And
Right.
we certainly have students on campus who are students of color, but they are the minority. And so, and, you know, a lot of these kids are coming from urban areas. Is Holland necessarily the place they want to spend 4 years? So there's all those questions. And so we're doing our best. And I think it's actually been really nice this semester because we can hold up the Many Voices Project as a recruiting tool. And some students got very excited about it. And so, you know, the more we do this, the more in these kind of programs, the more I think we become attractive as a theater department to them.
Okay. She's also saying that she was thinking of the Mosaic troupe in Detroit. Is that something you're familiar with?
No, but I'm writing these all down because I love hearing about new companies.
Okay.
The Mosaic troupe?
Yep.
Cool.
And if you want to unmute and say any more about it, go ahead.
Okay. Sorry. It's not new at all. It's been going on for quite a long time, and they are maybe middle school, but I think mostly high school kids. They've won a lot of awards and grants and so on. So they would definitely be worth contacting, I think.
Oh yes, I love that idea. Yeah. Okay, good. There's also a troupe like that in Chicago called the New Street Theater, and it's amazing the work these students produce. So yeah, thank you for that suggestion. That's really great.
Rich, I have a question or a comment. I have a nephew that works with the Victory Gardens Theater in Chicago. Are you familiar with them?
Very familiar. I know many.
And he's just been with him a couple of years. He does marketing and that type of thing. He was a theater student at Loyola, but I've just been, you know, I get all their mailings and their emails and things, and I've been real impressed with a lot of the things that they've done during the pandemic, reaching out to programs for kids in schools and things like that. But you're familiar with them already. Okay.
Yeah. But it's
Okay.
there's an interesting history to that company, and something kind of major happened there, and you probably know about it, in that the former artistic director was of Asian descent, came in and really shook things up in a huge way, and was there, I believe, 7 years approximately. And so he's left the company, and they were going to hire a well-known white director from Chicago, and the uprising that happened, not just from people of color, but from many people in the theater community, said, here we are again hiring another white person to run one of our institutions that has really come to embrace a more diverse season, a more diverse inclusion. And ultimately she stepped down. And so I believe they're still looking for an artistic director.
I think they are too. Why? Because I get some mailings about it and that. The other thing I wanted to ask you just personally, I missed a little bit of the beginning. When you came to Hope College, was it specifically to start something like this? Or was it a position you were looking at and then you just kind of evolved once you were there?
Kind of evolved, yeah. I was hired because John Tommy was retiring. And so there was a new position that opened up, and to the faculty's credit, I think they were also looking for to expand the diversity of the department, which is not very diverse. I admit, so. But I'm proud to be there. I'm proud to be that person representing. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
I have a question, Rich.
Sure.
I'm anticipating that in the nonprofit and educational theater, it'll be easier to get more diverse playwrights and plays. I'm wondering, what about the pushback with the for-profit theaters who are anticipating that they'll have to keep predominantly white audiences happy? Do you think that's a problem they're going to have to struggle with?
Absolutely. I mean, they don't have to struggle with it, right? I mean, I think,
right.
We could spend a whole hour and a half on just this or more. But I think what has happened as a result of this document that has been dispersed amongst major theaters in the country, including all the Broadway theaters and producers, is that it's no longer underground. I think for a lot of folks, a lot of people running theater companies who feel they are beholden to a certain cross-section of their audience, that they just sort of kick it under the table, right? Under the rug, and just continue business as usual. And I think people are going to have to respond now, and they are. And so as I said, there's the outpouring of responses from regional theaters has been phenomenal in terms of adhering to a lot of these demands that have been made.
You think the success of Hamilton has done or will do as far as opening up people's eyes, as far as characters to portray people and things like that?
I hope so. I think is in a small way, perhaps, but unfortunately, the opposite happens as well. When certain characters, for instance, it's become a big deal, as it should in American theater, that if you're casting West Side Story, that the sharks should be, something. I mean, this is an example, should be Latino, right? And so when somebody makes a faux pas and doesn't do that, they will look at Hamilton. George Washington wasn't Black. And so it's used in a reverse kind of way that is obviously not helpful and sort of doesn't even make sense in terms of what the argument is for more racial diversity in casting, right?
Richard, there is at least one play in Canada that won the best play and performance in their competition years ago, and it is now a television program that you can watch on either Netflix or Acorn. I think it's Acorn. It's called Kim's Convenience.
Oh yeah, I've watched Kim's Convenience.
Yeah, and it's a racial play with Kim and his family being of Asian, but actually Korean background, because the script always includes Korean words in there and Korean traditions. But when we saw it live, I thought, oh, please, Hope, please do this one. So it's one to think about. I don't know if it's available now that it's still, being used as this sitcom thing on television, but
Yeah.
it was great because it addressed the bicultural difficulties that people find in neighborhoods where they all live peacefully together, but all have different backgrounds and come together. It's similar to In the Heights
Sure.
in its original form. Of course, the TV series has expanded a lot, but
Yeah, thank you for that. Great suggestion.
Rich, I'd be interested in knowing a little bit about how you bring together people of different cultures, different colors, different backgrounds, who have limited time to get acquainted. How do you work it through? How do you draw them in? Do you just let things happen rather naturally? Or is there a distance that you have to bridge, and how do you do it?
Oh, that's a great question, Peg. Well, I think there are several ways. In some ways, it's no different than any other cast that comes together and are strangers. You start by trying to create as safe of a space as you can, letting people know that this is a space where they have the freedom to try things, to experiment, to be themselves, and know that nothing is off limits in terms of the creative spirit and putting themselves out there. I mean, at the same time, as I mentioned, some of these folks have never even been in a play before in my current cast. And so fortunately, they knew each other from the reading and knew each other before the reading, several of them. One of the other things we are very committed to is making sure that the support cast, so two of the three of our stage managers, one is Asian and one is African American. And that was really important for us as well, to make sure that there were other people of color in the room, again, to make it feel more familial and as a community. And so and I think that's been very, very helpful. Ironically, one of the stage managers came to the auditions just to support a friend. And I spotted her sitting there in the audience and I said, "Why aren't you auditioning?" And she said, "Well, I don't know. I'm just here to support my friends." So I actually convinced her to audition. And so we ended up casting all the other folks who had been in the reading, but she said she was willing to be a stage manager, and so now she's working on the show, and hopefully we'll get her to continue showing up and auditioning and get her as one of the family.
Are these theater majors?
None of them.
None. Okay.
None of them. But a couple of them are taking the theater class. I'm taking a class now, the Acting 2 class, and so that's how it starts, right? For love of theater, you take a class, you're part of a production, and suddenly, like me, it's like, oh, okay, maybe I can do this. And not that maybe they won't even do it as a career, but I think they'll have a new appreciation for it and also become theater goers, so.
Rich, is there or could there be a joint recruiting effort with theater, dance, and music? Do the departments work together at all on that?
Unfortunately, they don't. And here's why I think, because we're all competing, and I'm not saying this is right. I'm saying everybody is just trying to fill their classrooms, I mean, unfortunately, the theater department has declined, students in the past years, just in general. And so, and then, I mean, I think that's across the board, certainly in music, the same thing. Dance is doing pretty well. But they're also, we have limited scholarships to offer people. And so I think we all hold on to them pretty closely. That's an interesting idea, though. How do we do that?
So do you think, this is my own question, do you think then that if there were more scholarship funds available, that would make it easier?
Oh, gotcha. Which is what and actually they rose a little bit in the last year. But, I mean, while
So
we're
if you were to start a new scholarship, you would want, it would be helpful to designate it in such a way that it was for incoming or upper class classmen majoring in theater.
Absolutely.
Okay.
It would be especially phenomenal if it were especially geared toward
a student of color.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Is the Hope Office of Inclusion and Diversity working on any of those kind of things?
I don't think specifically for theater, but I certainly think that is part of their mission to help with recruitment, and they've been very phenomenal in terms of working with us to publicize what we're doing and making it readily available to everybody on the campus and in our community.
Can you say any more about that office? I mean, I think it's relatively new and most of us don't know much about it.
Sure, and I'm probably the wrong person to, but that'd be a great, the interim person running that. We just unfortunately lost a really phenomenal woman who was running it, and just this year. And so there's an interim person running it. But the whole idea is that there is a entity on campus that is very much devoted to the students who are underrepresented on all levels. And they have a place to go with and experience special programs where they can have advocates if they are having difficulties on campus, and everything else. So I think it's absolutely essential that we support it. It's a great thing to have.
The college did also just add a new officer for diversity and inclusion as part of the engagement team. She's a Hope alum. She was a basketball player. Kama, can't think of her last name right now. She's in my Monday morning meetings, but she has just started at the first of the year and is primarily at this point working closely with a newly formed group of alumni who are of diverse backgrounds. And so she's starting there with thinking about and talking about ways that Hope can be more inclusive and more.
Yeah. Are you talking about Amber Tejeda?
No, it's I'll look it up.
Okay.
Hold on a second, I'll be back. I just met her last week, Monday. She was in our first meeting with us, so hold on.
Well, while we're in the midst of Kim finding the question there, question I had is, how are you doing the staging differently for the Detroit 67 than you did for the initial read?
So it's a fully staged production, but it's a great question, Al, because one of the frustrations as a director for this production is that there are many moments of intimacy between characters, including dancing very closely and moments where somebody will just reach out and, for instance, and touch somebody's face, and obviously those things are off limits. And so how do you create new ways to show intimacy that don't involve touch, which has been an interesting challenge and one that we're still working through. There are ways to do it, but so that is so everybody's masked. It will be performed live each night and put on the internet, but at the same time, there won't be any audience in the theater. It's at the Nick, by the way, so it's being filmed in the Nick. So, which makes me doubly sad because I've always wanted to put a play in the Nick, one of our main stage plays. So we'll see. It's an interesting challenge that way.
How do
Our
we?
new officer for Center for Diversity and Inclusion is Kamara Sudbury. Sudbury. I'm not sure her year of graduation, but she came from Spectrum Health, where she was doing some work. And she is the primary point person now for the Alumni of Color Council.
Oh, cool. Very cool. Thank you for
Yep.
finding them. What were we going to say, Al? I'm sorry.
I lost it. I'll have it back in a minute.
I hear you.
Sorry, Al, while you're waiting for it to come back, we have another question. Is there any connection with Phelps Scholars, the most diverse group of students on campus?
Only in that many of Phelps scholars have taken theater classes and also been in our productions. So, and that's a great reminder that we should be reaching out to them in a larger way.
Mhm. And then another comment from Sally that she's always really impressed with the diversity of the cast in the Hsrt and whether or not you're involved with that.
Only in that once in a while. I just directed the Christmas show, and then for West Side Story I was the dialect coach. So you know, in different capacities, but yeah, it's one of the advantages of hiring people and paying them is that you can do that kind of outreach, especially depending on the shows you choose. You know, it was such a big deal when I was working with more regularly with Hsrt when I first got here. You know, one of the first plays that I suggested was To Kill a Mockingbird. I'm not, well, that was one, but the other one is Raisin in the Sun, which we ultimately did, but it took about 2 or 3 years of me convincing, because I was told our audiences don't want to see that play. This is an American classic, a brilliant play, and ultimately we proved that wrong. But it's so I think there quite often we underestimate our audiences. To go back to what Al was saying, you know, that I think those old theaters that have been, you know, continuously cater to a certain cross-section of the community, think they're not always, I think they're making assumptions about what their audience will come and see. And I think Hope audiences have proved that to me over and over again. So.
To hear. Can you remind us again, I think you mentioned it earlier, but when will Detroit 67 be available?
The dates, it opens the 25th and runs that weekend and the following weekend.
I have down 26, 27, and 28. It's no 20.
26 is a Friday.
Yeah, 26 is a Friday.
Thank you.
27th Saturday, both at 7:30. 28th is a 2 p.m. afternoon show. And then 4, 5, and 6 are all 7:30 shows the next week.
Thank you, Al.
Yeah.
What month?
This month.
Oh,
This month and then the 1st of March.
Yeah. We open
Hey,
in a week.
Al, do you want to maybe email that to me and I can email it out to this whole group?
Sure. Yeah, I would be happy to. Rich, how do we find the link to get the virtual tickets for these things?
If you should be able to go to the ticket office and it should be on their page.
Okay.
I'll find it too, Al.
Okay.
Okay, question from Marie as to whether or not you're working with theater departments of local high schools at all.
We are, and that's been one of my goals, is to reach out. So I've been attending, well, when we could attend shows. Up until before the pandemic started, I was showing up at every possible performance I could with my limited schedule, but and reaching out to students in particular that I thought, and the plan for this year actually, in part of my goals was to do workshops with each of the local high schools, so I could get to know the students better. Not just students of color, but all the students.
Yeah.
As you know, we want our numbers to get much larger.
Neat.
Can we go back to Kill a Mockingbird, which you chose to put on stage? I took my young grandchildren. They were in junior high school at that time. I didn't tell them what it was about. And they sat there just enthralled. And when the court case was decided, they both turned to me and said, "That's not right." So it has a place, theater has a place to
Yep.
educate the next generation.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I so agree. And the fact, again, underestimating not, our audiences, right? And young people,
Yeah.
they're smarter than we give them credit for so often. And
Exactly.
so, yeah, I appreciate that comment.
Well, and To Kill a Mockingbird never grows old either.
Oh, yeah. Just had an amazing revival on Broadway.
Yeah, Jeff Daniels.
Yeah.
How do any comments about any August Wilson shows that you thought about?
I think about August Wilson every day. He's my favorite playwright. And that's next on my agenda to finally have enough students that I can call upon to produce an August Wilson play. I've seen every one of his plays on Broadway that was on Broadway, and other productions, of course. And I teach it in my theater history classes in my in my Theater 101 class, because I think he is obviously one of the greatest playwrights of the 20th century.
And Ma Rainey is making a comeback right now too.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Rich, would you comment on how the absence of an audience impacts the performances? Because so often we know that audiences and casts innervate each other. Energize.
Absolutely. That's such a great observation, Peg. And one that is, it's a little heartbreaking in some ways, because that's the crucial piece missing from live theater, is that interaction between, I was talking to my American theater class about this yesterday. Is it really theater if you're watching it through a tiny screen, right? And not there live. I mean, the second best, one of the reasons we don't just videotape one performance and then just run it over and over again is because, at the very least, I feel it's important that the students have that repetition of making new discoveries each night. So that's the next closest thing, but it is that energy that happens. And if you've been to the theater, you all know what it's like when you can feel that exchange between the performers and the people in the audience, and vice versa. And so, yeah, I miss it. I've done a lot of readings as an actor and directed some since the pandemic started. And each time I watch it, I'm like, okay, this is cool. At least we're keeping the memory of theater alive, but it's different. It's different.
What about artificial clapping? Does that do anything?
No,
I can't imagine it, but.
Yeah. Because it's, I think the performers know the difference, and it really is that magic exchange that sometimes you don't expect, or that there's a new reaction to something that you didn't get the night before. So that really makes it fun.
Rich, what's after Detroit 67? What would the next one be, and when?
The next performance, or on the main stage, you mean? It's Ordinary Days, which is our musical, or small cast musical.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And when is that scheduled for?
Al, help me out.
I may have it. Yeah, I do have it. Ordinary Days opens on April 16. On the 16th and 17th and the 22nd and 24th, it's a 7:30 show. And
Okay.
on April 18, it's a 2 p.m.
My mind is spinning over here. I'm just wondering if we could work with Special Events Committee to try to plan something for HAS members around that to tune in and then have a discussion or something.
That'd be great.
Okay.
What's the story of Ordinary Days?
The young people figuring out life in New York City and all the complications of that world. Kind of
Tell us a little bit again about smart people. when that staged reading's going to happen, and I know you
Sure.
gave us a little synopsis.
You bet. Let me pull up my document here. So smart people, I'll read this to you. It's the eve of Obama's first election. 4 of Harvard University's brightest, a surgeon, an actress, a psychologist, and a neuropsychiatrist, are all interested in different aspects of the brain, particularly how it responds to race. But like all smart people, they are also searching for love, success, and identity in their lives. So it's a multiracial cast, 1 Asian performer, 2 African-American, and 1 white. And as it says, it's, examining how we think about race and how they interact with each other and how they ultimately navigate these issues.
And do you have the date for that and exit strategy as well?
I do. So Smart People is March 12th. And exit strategy is April 9th.
We'll try to put all this stuff in an email and get it back out to people.
Oh, thank you so much.
Here's a little personal question that when you were giving your background a little bit, you at the age of 20, you said you left Oakland, you went to New York. Was it a big step? I mean, obviously it was a big step. Did it take a little bit to get adapted to?
Honestly, Al, I moved there with my best friend, and we both moved there to go to acting school. And from the moment I stepped into town, I felt like I was home. I don't know why. I should have been terrified. I mean, it had certainly helped that, I had my good friend with me, but I just felt like it was such a great place to be in the, early 80s. I got to see theater all the time. I saw some of the great performances of that decade. And I was like well, I won't use that derogatory term, but I was a very happy kid. Let's just say that. But I mean, my mother wasn't so happy about it. She was always nervous, but
Well, and it was a long way from home.
yeah.
How'd
One of
that
our-
grandmother feel?
She missed me, and I missed her, but yeah, she definitely.
Had she been instrumental in encouraging you to take that path? Had she been
No,
discouraging you?
unfortunately, no. She passed away not too after I had been there maybe a year and a half or so. So that was really hard. But she was, she was the kind of grandmother that just whatever I did, she was supportive. So there's always that little piece of, I would imagine, of just you worry about your kids and your grandkids, right? Wherever they are.
Rich, is the actor's letter manifesto, the 31-page document, is it online somewhere?
Yes. And it's if you just Google "We See You," white American theater, it'll pop up, and the manifesto is there.
Okay.
It's a fascinating document.
I'm not.
Back to, I'm just curious, at the beginning, you were talking about the study that sort of researched the discrepancies in pay
Mm-hmm.
In relationship to race. And I didn't catch if the same was true for male and female actors. Do you know if there's any studies on that?
I'm sure there are, but that wasn't part of that particular study that dealt more with.
I just was thinking about that because I had this experience. I was down in Florida last week, which anything can happen in Florida, in my opinion. But the night of the Super Bowl, I was around a person who made the comment. So they were talking about how the woman ref, that it was the first female ref of a Super Bowl. And the announcers were kind of talking about her background and how she was making history on this night. And I said out loud, good for her, way to break the glass ceiling. That's so exciting. And then I said, but my question would be, is she being paid as much as previous, male refs have been paid for Super Bowl reffing? And this person next to me said, oh, well, let me guess, I suppose you believe in affirmative action too then, based on that comment. And it went downhill from there, obviously, the conversation.
Right.
But it just has me really kind of reeling about this wage discrepancy thing, whether it's male, female, or race or whatever. It's just the same job should be paying the same, it's just
Absolutely. Yeah.
it's very frustrating. So I appreciate that you shared that. And then I guess my next question would be, is that something that you feel is a tangible thing that people can use when they're negotiating contracts in the future then with acting companies and other employers?
I absolutely. Well, it's hard because you don't necessarily know what somebody else is making, right? Sometimes it's an agent negotiating for you, or the fact that it's even an issue is, I think it's, as I was mentioning earlier, I think there are things done that are often behind closed doors. And because we're not privy to them, it's how do we know until you see a study like this, that this is, and so obviously that is also addressed in the BIPOC letter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I know it's certainly been true in churches too, male versus female called pastors and their packages. It's just been outrageous. The differences.
My wife's a pastor, and yeah, I've heard.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's see, looks like another question came in. Where can the general public learn how to access these fantastic performances? I've not seen them advertised. And with everyone not being out and about, we're not seeing posters, etc. So
Sure. Well, fortunately, now you're going to get all that information.
Al's going to provide us all with it.
So yeah, that's at least for the rest of this year. But it's I'm going to write myself a note just for the future. Is there somebody that I can direct?
Yeah, I would suggest any pre-performance time. It would be great if you wanted to send a little push just to the hasp@hope.edu account, because then I can include that in our constant contact messages, which goes to the full membership. And obviously HASP has a lot of patrons of the arts, so I think that would be a great place to remind people that these things are up and coming.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah.
No, I got the information on Detroit 67 and Ordinary
Days.
Ordinary Days off the Hope College Theater production website. But I didn't see anything about the Many Voices project.
That should be coming up.
Okay, I thought maybe I just missed it.
Yeah, and that's great if people are savvy enough to search it on their own. But if anything you want to send directly to hasp@hope.edu, Rich, I'll make sure it gets out to our members directly, so they don't have to look for it.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And any links that we can provide is good.
Yeah, I have to make it really easy. So, right, Peg?
Well, you're a great communicator, so it's always a valuable source of information.
Just look and click. That's what we need. Click here for more information.
That's what I need too.
No, you need a secretary.
Yeah, that's true. So far, that nobody in my department is going to offer that. I don't think.
Awesome. Anybody else have any questions?
Just in as much as you're even aware of what's happening generally with the enrollment interest for next fall, are we on a par with past years? Are we falling behind? Are we?
Well, I think, well, at least
about a month ago when we got an update. We were surprisingly in a good place. So the numbers were looking good. I mean, everybody's struggling, but I think we were in a better place than we thought we were going to be. Now things change, obviously. There were a lot of folks who had put in their applications but hadn't yet sent the check, right? So that's the next step, and I think where we are now.
Yeah, deposits are down across the board, I think, for quite a few colleges.
Yeah, definitely.
When you were saying we, are you speaking specifically about the theater department, or are you talking about campus-wide?
Oh, campus-wide. I'm sorry.
That's what I was assuming, but no,
Yeah.
that's fine.
Yeah. So
There have been multiple reports that there are more kids both this year and next year, considering, taking a gap year until things are more normalized.
I don't blame them. I mean, I would.
I know.
Yeah.
I would too. Yeah.
I mean,
Especially at the college level.
yeah,
Pretty
absolutely.
hard at the high school
It's
level.
it's a lot of money to spend for a minimized experience, so.
Yeah. And I'm teaching all my classes live for that reason. It's risky, but I also feel like, especially for a theater class, especially an acting class, if you're trying to do that over Zoom it's dreadful anyway, but so.
Then you wonder, once the COVID pandemic is history, will there be a flood of students coming in? Because they have been taking a gap year. It'll be interesting to see that dynamic.
Yeah, I think we hope so.
Rich, do you have any idea on campus-wide how many of the classes are probably just virtual? Is it half or more?
I think that's a safe bet.
Yeah,
Okay.
I feel like that's what I've heard. I want to say maybe feel like I heard somewhere like a little over 30% were just virtual and the rest were either hybrid or in person.
Right. Yeah.
And having a daughter there, I would say that sounds about right. She has one that's totally virtual and the rest are either hybrid or in person. So that's probably fairly accurate.
Yeah. Is she, what year is she?
Well, it's her first year living on campus, so she's a freshman, but she graduated high school a year early and had taken quite a few classes at Hope before. So she's a sophomore credit status wise, but freshman year in terms of her living experience and everything. So.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
What dorm does she live in?
She's in Collins. She's a swimmer, so as close to the pool as possible.
Yeah.
But she almost didn't move back this semester just because she felt like it wasn't really worth paying to live on campus, during COVID with all of the quarantine rules and everything. And it's just, such an odd experience. You can't really have people in your room or go to other people's rooms, and less of her classes were in person first semester than this semester. So it was a real toss up, but in the end, she decided to still go back. So.
It's hard. So hard.
Let's see. Last comment is just that we should do what we can to highlight these performances to local schools, community theaters, and the city, which makes me wonder, does the Holland Sentinel give a shout out to Hope Theater events, or is that something you have to pay for or negotiate?
I mean, we send press releases. Once in a great while, they'll pick something up, but not on a regular basis. So
Okay.
it's hit or miss.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll do what we can on our end. So we'll try.
Kim, probably it would be nice to put in the constant comment the site with the man. Oh my gosh, just my brain. The one who puts out what happens every week at
Derek
Hope and
Emerson.
what's his name?
Derek Emerson.
Derek Emerson. Thank you. Just puts out
okay.
website, and Derek will add you to the email, and it just comes to us every weekend.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
A lot of us get that.
Can you?
But not all So
If
That
you
would
think of
be-
it, can you forward it to me next time you get it? I just would like to see what the content looks like and,
Yeah, that I would too.
Okay.
We can do that.
I can do that right now,
all right.
but I
cool.
have to leave.
Okay, thanks, cool. All right, well, it's 2:25. Anybody else? This is such a nice group today. I could just hang out and talk with y'all for,
Right.
And for some of us, it's our favorite topics.
right.
Well, I appreciate you all. Thank you for being here and listening to me.
Thanks a lot. It was very
Thank
interesting.
you. It was great.
Yes, Rich, we
Very good.
always appreciate having you. I'm glad that you talked about many voices. It was very valuable to learn all of that. It was also nice to learn a little bit more about your background.
Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, this was awesome. Thanks so much, everyone. And thank you, Rich. And thank you for being here today.
You
Thank
bet.
you, everyone.
Have
Stay
a great
warm, enjoy the sunshine from a warm place. Thanks.
care. Thanks.